Welcome to AMM 120, and today we're going to talk about psychographics and cultural perspective on US, and mainly focus on consumerism. Since we had the holiday, we're losing basically one day, so we need to make up for that. So this is what this lecture is about. So we've been discussing our culture pretty much all throughout the quarter, so I'm not going to give you too many new things, just some basic concepts. So for a quick refresher, what culture actually means. The accumulation of shared meanings, practices, norms, rituals, things like that, traditions among members of a society. So kind of think of it as the personality of a society, okay? And it varies. Like we've talked about, our culture is American culture is very different from other cultures in other parts of the world. There's a lot of similarities, but there's also a lot of differences. And how it works with consumer behavior, because America is known, we tend to get criticized a lot because of our consumerism that Americans consume. We consume too much. We're very materialistic. So how it works when it comes to consumer behavior is that we have the laws of supply and demand. So if there's a demand for it and people are willing to pay for it, then there's going to be companies and people willing to manufacture goods and services to supply that demand, fulfill that demand. Now, what you have to understand is that the consumer has a lot of power, because if there's no demand, they're not going to supply it. So whenever you hear comments like, why is there still TMZ? Why are there reality shows? Why is there still the Inquirer? The reason's simple. There's someone there to watch it or buy it. If no one would buy it, if no one would watch TMZ and no one would pay attention, if no one would buy the Inquirer would go out of business. It's the fact that there's someone there buying it. So this whole concept of, well, it's companies trying to shove things down our throat, that's not really viable, because the consumer has the ultimate power, believe it or not, when it comes to that. Now, a good example of how this work is in the mid-70s, like middle of the 70s going before 80s, a fit, trim body was really popular. So any product that allowed for less calories did better. It just sold better. And you have to understand, back then you didn't have the internet. So you don't have people looking up nutritional value. They just looked at less calories. So that was easy for a lot of food companies, because as we all know, fake sugar and things that have less calories aren't necessarily better for you, right? We know that now, but we didn't know that back then. So consumers couldn't check that out. So products by default that offered less calories just were doing better, okay? Now, it is a two-way street, so it has to resonate with the consumer. Now, do keep in mind that sometimes new products and innovations, they do help, can shape current ideals, and current ideas can shape products. So it's a two-way street, okay? It really is. Now, innovation can be tricky. Some consumers that aren't educated or can be even hostile to new innovation. Sometimes new is exciting and different, but it can also be scary and too weird, so they'll reject it. So just understand that companies want to stick with a proven track record. They essentially want a guarantee. That's why we see a little bit less creativity in many sectors, like I'd say clothing, graphics, food items, just because they want what's proven, what's guaranteed. So they don't want to experiment and let's try something new and get a little bit creative and see if this will fly, because there's a risk. There's a risk that the population won't accept it. So companies today want to take less of a risk. They want to take more or less a guarantee that something's going to sell. So that makes it really tricky, in particular for those that want to innovate. For those of you that are very creative, it's a tough world out there because companies don't want to take a lot of risks. That's why a lot of people do end up doing their own thing. That's why you have things like Kickstarter now, because they're trying to get funding in another way, because they realize that working with a big company isn't going to do it, but they still need the money. In terms of how culture works, well, the basic ways that we kind of characterize the world. So many things to consider, like the heritage or history, government interaction, intellectual climate, how well-informed people are, how you embrace or reject your history. I've given you a lot of examples how we're trying to kind of erase our history. I don't necessarily think that's a good idea, but some people do, in particular bad moments of our history. I still think I'm under the school of thought that you should learn from the mistakes and move on, not erase it, but some people think differently. Government interaction, again, it gets very political. If people want more interaction and other people want less. Um, and remember that it's not just it's economic and non-economic. So it deals with money and it also things that have nothing to do with money. So leisure, work, how we view gender, etc. This all is part of our culture. And it varies. It's not static. It doesn't stay the same. It changes from one decade to the next. You can see various changes. Now, certain aspects is ecology, social structure, and ideology. So ecology, the way the system is adapted to its habitat. So we're kind of sometimes borrow from other cultures. So like the Japanese and space efficiency, more simplicity, more minimalism. Social structure, the way which orderly social life is maintained. And this varies. So like I just heard yesterday where a government body, New York, wants to uh, reduce the penalty of urinating in public on the streets in New York. And the reason, I believe the quote was, they want to have less minorities be arrested. So that was the justification. So we don't want people getting such a harsh punishment for urinating on the street. So that's different because if you're caught urinating, let's say Orange County over here, you'd get in pretty big trouble. So it varies even within the same country, believe it or not. Ideology, mental characteristics of people and way they relate to the environment and social groups. So ideology, and some people don't like to hear this, but typically people are sheep, so we tend to follow the herd, follow the group. Everyone thinks they're their own individual, but we tend to have a sheep mentality a lot of the time, so we do see people go in droves in a certain ideology. But of course, we always have people that disagree or think differently. Now, norms and conventions. Norms are rules that dictate right from wrong, and conventions are norms regarding the conduct of everyday life. So there are informal rules, there's trends, that includes behavior, verbal, nonverbal. So like urinating on the street, it's not supposed to be okay. Flashing your genitalia to someone, not okay. Stop sign. We have a stop sign, we have a red light, you stop. You're not supposed to just, drive on through. So those are things that we look at in a society that could change from one society to the next. So what is it that we want in a typical American structure? What do we typically look at? Security, work ethic, self-actualization, fit, health, stay young. We admire leisure. We idolize youth, high-profile individuals. We definitely, the world likes this, but celebrity culture. But definitely can't think of anything unless you feel secure. If you feel that things are in jeopardy, you're unsafe, then everything else seems very meaningless at that point. So security is very important. But at that point, work ethic, you either have it or you don't. We are criticized that we are too work obsessed. And we do see extremes. Some people work too much and some people don't work enough. Self-actualization and to be the best that you can be and I guess be your best individual, that's really big on American culture. And we do admire leisure, vacationing and taking time and being famous and being known. And before being famous meant you were a good dancer, a good singer, a good actor, actress. Now it's, being in a reality show, winning a eating contest. Lady Gaga, I mean, she didn't necessarily get famous from her voice or music. It was more of wearing this meat dress, for example, and being more controversial, and that's how she got the attention. So what are we known for? What is our culture? What do we value? Now, a lot of people do consider America as very big on materialism. Is it keeping up with the Kardashians? Because it used to be keeping up with the Joneses, which is like the wealthier family in your neighborhood, but now it's the Kardashians because we see their wealth showcased. You can see it online, you see it on their show, and now people are trying to attain that, even though they don't make that kind of money. And one thing that you have to understand is it seems like they have a life of just leisure, but they have to do appearances. They have to earn that money or to be able to maintain that lifestyle. Overconsumption. The bigger, the more, is it better? What are we? What a nation of what? What exactly are we? And that's something that you have to ask yourself and, you being part of that culture. Now, consumerism, we're big on consumerism. The concept that of ever expanding consumption of goods is advantageous to the economy. So that's what overall consumerism is. And the fact or practice of increasing consumption. It's a critique from American culture. We're a free market capitalist society, but should that change? Should we become a socialist society? A lot of Bernie Sanders fans believe so. Is the system typically fair? Now, you have to look at your value placed on material and non-material things. So materials like clothing, brands, tools, furniture, study items. We look at how we study items of how people live. So certain brands, how much you're willing to spend on things, and the non-material. So your thoughts, your feeling, your behaviors, values, standards, your religions, expectations, etc. So what is more important, the type of coffee you drink, the type of phone or tablet that you have, the brand of car, your handbag, or is it the non-material, love, family, faith, morals? Is it quantity over quality? I mean, things have gotten bigger. I mean, just our serving sizes. Look at our popcorn. It used to be 5 cups, now it's a tub. A typical bagel was 3 inches in diameter, now it's 5 to 6, almost double. That's huge. You go to a bagel place, any bagelry, and it's like this 6-inch bagel. It's like huge. So more is better, or is it? Is bigger better? Is more expensive better? Is more famous better? And look at, again, what makes you happy? What contributes to our happiness? Is it stuff? Is it money? Is it family? Is it relationships? Should leaders in government play a role? There's government agencies that try to measure happiness. I'm not sure how they do that. They try to explain it and it never makes sense. But, is it their job? Fun. You have to make that distinction between pleasure and happiness. There's 3 types of fun: meaningful, meaningless, and harmful. The meaningful fun, and it has a very positive impact. There's meaningless fun, and that's not bad either, because it just brings you fun just for the sake of fun. It doesn't necessarily bring good to the world, but it doesn't do any harm, and it's a good thing. But there's also harmful fun, and that's the stuff that can bring you pleasure, and it might feel good at the time, but do you feel good afterwards? So that's something to ask yourself. What brings you fun and pleasure? But after doing something from that list, if you ask yourself that and you have a list of answers, after doing one of those things, are you better off for doing it? Are you better off? Is your life better after doing that? And if the answer is not, then why do you still do it? It's like drugs. You feel good at the time doing it, but after that you feel really bad. So you got to look at a long-term versus short-term, because the short-term fun is pleasurable and it can be very exciting, but it may not last. It's very short-term, and you're constantly going back and seeking that. And that's where it can turn into really harmful, negative stuff. So remember, happiness and your lifestyle, it's a choice. That's the bottom line. We live in this country, and wherever you end up living, you have the choice to be happy or not happy. It's totally on you. No one's forcing you. No one's telling you have to. You do have a responsibility to not be miserable around the people you're with, but ultimately that is a choice that you have. You have that choice. You can be bummed out and depressed and let that take over. Or if you realize you have a problem, then you have to realize, I need professional help and I need to go get it. Or just I'm complaining, or I'm not happy with what's going on, but it's on me. It's on you, really. And that's our society has a lot of that kind of freedom. We are kind of going more towards, well, what can this society do for you? Back in the day, the question was not what your country can do for you, but what can you do for your country? And now it's the other way around. What can this country do for you? But if you're sitting there waiting for your country to do something for you, you're going to be sitting there and waiting for a long time. So best thing to do is for you to take it on your own hands, in your own terms, and realize it's really on you. You have a choice. And if you're not happy with your situation, then you need to go out there and change it. If you're not happy with your grades, study harder, get some help, and do better, and do all the work that you need to do. Not skip class and not do the homework. Or if you want to have more money, then you need to get a part-time job. And if the job you have doesn't pay you, then maybe go to another one that pays you more. Move up. See, these are choices you have. Sometimes the payoff is later. Sometimes it's sooner. I know we'd all want the payoff to be immediate, but it doesn't always work out that way. So ultimately, our culture, how other people view us, that really is on them. What matters is what we actually do here in this culture, or wherever country some of you might end up moving, where you end up living. It's what you make of it that's going to matter at the end of the day, quite honestly. Okay? It's your choice. All right? So thank you for listening, and thank you for taking AMM 120. I hope it wasn't too bad, and good luck on your finals.